Welcome back. Today we are going to get started with our first set of population notes. If you have not watched the Hans Rosling TED Talk on population, please pause this video and do so now. After having watched the Hans Rosling video, you know that our population is growing at a rapid pace and we are on track for exponential growth. Therefore, population is an important issue that we are going to talk about. Today, our two essential questions are, or the two things that we are trying to figure out, is where is the world's population distributed, and how do we measure population? The study of population is called demography, and geographers study population because population is becoming an important issue. We currently have more people living on Earth than ever before. We have a record 7.5 billion people or more living on the surface of the Earth. And like Hans Rosling said, we are at a record pace for increase. And nearly all of our population growth is occurring in poor countries. Why is this an issue? The issue that scientists and geographers are concerned about is the issue of overpopulation. Not only is it too many people living on not enough space, but also the consumption of resources. So the question becomes, how many people can Earth support? This is a cartogram which shows population on the Earth based on the size of the country. We can see that the largest populations are found in China, India, and Indonesia. These are three of our four main population clusters. Whereas compared to Canada, which is a fairly large country, square foot wise, however, this map it looks very small because not a lot of people live there. So, where do all the people live in the world if they're not living in Canada? Well, we have four major population clusters, three of which are located in Asia. Our first population cluster is found in East Asia, where 5/6 of the population live in China. Our second population cluster is found in South Asia, where 3/4 of the people live in India. Our third population cluster is found in Europe, where 3/4 of the population live in urban areas, meaning they live in some sort of city. And our fourth population cluster is found in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Another major population cluster that could be considered the fifth population cluster is in the northeastern part of the United States, along a corridor from Boston, Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. What do all of these places have in common? What is one resource that each of these population clusters have access to? If you said water, you are correct. All four of these population clusters are centered around some sort of body of water. Water is important to support large populations, not only for access to fresh water for farming, but also access to trade and commerce. Business is able to be conducted, things are able to be shipped, economies are able to be grown. These four population clusters also have a very temperate or mild climate. Temperature doesn't get too hot and it doesn't get too cold, making the ability to have long growing seasons. These areas are all able to produce a high amount of agriculture, therefore leading to support a high population. Question number 1. What is the approximate population of the world? Answer is C, roughly 7.5 billion people. Question number 2. The majority of the world's population lives on what continent? The answer is D, Asia, where 3 out of the 4 population clusters are located. So now that we know where people live throughout the world, what is the population distribution in the United States? The United States has population clusters on both the east and the west coast. The United States also has population clusters in urban areas or in large cities. What parts of the population are sparsely populated? If you said areas that have either mountains or deserts, you are correct. You will notice that the western part of the United States, where we have the Rocky Mountains and many of our national parks, are sparsely populated. This is because life in higher terrains and higher altitudes, and also life within protected wildlife areas is not sustainable. Question number 3. Where is population clustered in the United States? Answer is all of the above. We have population clusters along the East Coast, the West Coast, and in urban areas such as large cities. For example, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Chicago, and Kansas City. So now that we know where people live, where do people not live? Okay, when we are talking about the area in which people live, we are talking about the ecumene, which is the portion of Earth's population that is occupied by permanent human settlement. This area or this territory is often influenced by climate, topography, and resources. And over time, that portion of Earth's surface has continued to increase. So currently today, we have roughly 75% of our world's population living on 5% of the land. So that is like taking 3/4 of your classroom and all trying to fit on 3 desks. There's still a lot of space left on Earth, but a lot of it is considered uninhabitable. And sparsely populated places are the drylands, wetlands, coldlands, and highlands. Are there any exceptions to these areas? Can you think of any dryland, coldland, highland, or wetland where people live? If you said Las Vegas, Nevada, I would have to agree with you. Las Vegas is in the middle of the desert. Typically, without man-made inventions and piping of water, life in Las Vegas would not be sustainable. However, as technology has increased and water has been able to be piped in, humans have been able to build a fairly large city in Las Vegas and inhabit the dry desert area. So, now that we know where people live versus where people don't live, how do we measure population? Population is measured in density, and density is just the number of people. There are 3 different ways in which we can measure density. The first is arithmetic density. In arithmetic density is measured by the people per land area. So this is people per square foot or people per square mile. The most populated country in the world is Monaco, which has a population of 33,000 people per square mile. That's roughly about 33,000 people living in the block that is Park High School. Mongolia, on the other hand, is the most sparsely populated country in the world. They have only 5 people living per square mile. Another way to measure density is through physiological density. And physiological density is people per arable land area. An arable land area is just a fancy way of saying farmland. So, physiological density shows the relationship between population and resources. How many people are supported by the amount of farmland that's available in that country. The last way to measure population density is agricultural density. And agricultural density is measured by farmers per arable land area, or how many farmers live on that farmland. Agricultural density shows the relationship between farmers and productivity levels. A low agricultural density means a greater productivity and technology and development level. If you think about it, modern farms in the United States today are hundreds, if not thousands, of acres, and oftentimes the farming staff is only a handful of people. So you could have 5 farmers per 500 acres. If you travel to a less developed country and look at the agricultural density, you would have maybe 1 farmer who would be responsible for 1 acre of farmland. So you're going to have a much higher agricultural density. In a less developed country, if you were looking at how many farmers you would have in the 500 acres of farmland, that number would be very high compared to the United States. So for agricultural density, the lower the density, the greater the level of development. This map shows arithmetic density. Remember, arithmetic density is people per square mile or people per land area. This is the typical type of density that we see. On this map, you can see our population clusters of China, India, Indonesia, and Europe. Right? These 4 areas all have very high arithmetic densities, meaning they have roughly 200 or more people per square kilometer, compared to the United States that is at below 50. So we have less than 50 people per square kilometer. This map shows physiological density. Remember, physiological density is people per arable land or people per farmland. So, on this map, the higher the physiological density, the more people that farmland has to support. If we look at Japan, Japan has a very high physiological density. That's because Japan has a large population in a small portion of land. So there's not a lot of farmland that's available in Japan. However, that small amount of farmland needs to support a very vast or large population. If you notice, India and China, our top 2 populated countries, have lower physiological densities than someplace like Japan or South Korea. That's because the overall land area in China and Japan is greater than the land area in China and India is greater than the land area in South Korea or Japan. There's more farmland in China and India to support the larger populations than there are in South Korea or Japan. This last map shows agricultural density, or the farmers per arable land area, or how many farmers does it take to farm the land. Remember, with agricultural density, the lower the density, the higher the level of development. If you look at China and India, both China and India have very high agricultural density. This means that farmers in China or India are only able to farm small plots of land. Okay, so you have lots of farmers to cover lots of land area. If you look at the United States, on the other hand, the United States has very low agricultural density, meaning we have very few farmers that are responsible for taking care of all of the farmland in the United States. And that is due to the advances in farm technology that are available in more developed countries compared to less developed countries. Question number 3. Population clusters are mostly located near. Answers all of the above. Population clusters are located near coasts or waterways where you can facilitate trade and travel, but also fertile land and rivers that can facilitate or help improve the overall agriculture or the amount of food. In order to have a large population, a country needs to have easily accessible food sources. Question number 4. The number of farmers per square mile of farmland is called what? Answer is agricultural density. Remember, the lower your agricultural density, the higher the level of development. So, how do we know where populations are increasing? Or what statistics do we look at when we measure population? There are 3 different measures that we use to calculate population growth. They are crude birth rate, crude death rate, and natural increase rate. The crude birth rate, or the CBR, is the total number of live births in a year for every 1,000 people in society. So if you take 1,000 people, how many babies are going to be born? Currently, the world average is about 20. Crude death rate, or CDR, is the total number of deaths in a year for every 1,000 people. So if you take 1,000 people and put them in a room, they're asking how many of those people are going to die in a year. Currently, the world average is about 8. Then you have your natural increase rate, or your NIR. And this is the percent in which a population grows in a year. And your natural increase rate is calculated by taking your crude birth rate minus your crude death rate. So is your population increasing or decreasing? Currently, the world's population is growing at 1.2%, or roughly 80 million people per year. And in your lifetime, we have added nearly 1 billion people to the world's population. At current rates, the doubling time is 54 years. So that means within your lifetime, our population will go from almost 8 billion to almost 16 billion. And 95% of that population growth is going to be clustered in less developed countries. This map shows the world's natural increase rate. Here we can tell the areas in which population is growing rapidly. Those areas are parts of Central America, a large majority of Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. These are all areas that are considered to be less developed areas. This map shows the crude birth rate. Okay, so how many babies are being born for every 1,000 people? Again, you notice that your less developed areas of Central America, Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia all have higher crude birth rates. What other measures are we using to study population? 3 other statistics that we look at are total fertility rate, infant mortality rate, and life expectancy. Total fertility rate, or TFR, is the average number of births a woman will have in her lifetime. Okay? So how many children will she have? Currently, the world average is 2.6. Another statistic that we use is infant mortality rate, or IMR. Infant mortality rate is the annual number of deaths of children under 1 year per 1,000 live births. So that's if you take 1,000 babies and you put them in a room together, how many of them will die before their first birthday? The current world average is 46. The last statistic we look at is life expectancy. This is the average number of years a newborn can expect to live at current mortality levels, right? How long are people going to live? Currently, the world average is 68.9 years. This map shows the crude birth rate population. We already looked at this map, right? And we determined that the higher crude birth rates can be found in our less developed countries. This map shows the crude death rate, so the number of people that die each year per every 1,000 persons. Again, notice the similarities between these two maps. Okay? Why do you think areas such as Central Africa have a very high crude birth and crude death rate? If you said it's because of lack of access to technology or healthcare, you are correct. This map shows the children per childbearing years per woman. So a woman's total fertility rate. So how many kids on average is a woman going to have? The darker the orange, the higher the total fertility rate. Notice again that our less developed areas in the world have higher total fertility rates. Why do you think that is? If you said because a lack of access to technology and healthcare, you are correct. Okay, so infant mortality rate is also very high in your less developed areas. This is because many areas have a lack of access to healthcare and technology. So women are having more children because not all of their children are making it to adulthood. In the majority of Africa, infant mortality rates are 60 and above. So that's 60 children or more for every 1,000 births die before they reach the age of 1. This map shows life expectancy at birth. Notice that the same areas that had high infant mortality rates and high total fertility rates also have low life expectancy rates. People aren't living as long in less developed areas. Question number 5. Crude birth rate minus crude death rate equals what? What statistic can we calculate? The answer is B, the rate of natural increase, or your natural increase rate. Question number 6. The average number of children a woman will have in her lifetime is called? The answer is fertility rate, or total fertility rate. Question number 7. Most of the world's population growth is occurring in least developed regions. True or false? That answer is true. Women in countries that are less developed are having more children because they have a higher infant mortality rate. Therefore, their population is going to grow rapidly because they are producing more children. Okay, what your assignment is to write your note summary. You're going to answer these 2 summary questions. Number 1, where is the world's population distributed? I want to know, where do people live and where do people not live? What are the population clusters? Question number 2 is, how do we measure population? What are the 6 statistics that we use to measure population? Just define them.